Landscape of Containers and Cloud Native with Shayne Boyer.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your humble host. Make sure to check out www.azuredevops.show for past episodes and show notes. And first announcement coming up quick, I'll be at Microsoft Ignite, and I'm one of the official community reporters. If you're a speaker, send me an email. I'd love to record a pre-conference interview to get people excited about your talk, and then afterwards, encourage people to watch the recording. And if you're at the conference and see me with a bunch of camera gear, stop me and say hi. Today, we have Shayne Boyer, and he was an ASP.NET MVP before joining Microsoft, and now he is at Microsoft as a principal cloud advocate and .NET lead. And you can find him on Twitter at spboyer, SPBOYER. And he's with me today. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of stuff going on. I want to dig into that, but I think some people probably saw you at .NET Conf. But for those who've not familiar with your work, what's your journey been, and how did you end up at Microsoft?
My journey is probably similar to some of the others here on the team and other various teams here. I was an ASP.NET MVP, kind of way back when. I want to say right around when .NET or ASP.NET went open source, was right about that time frame. Also, same time frame that TypeScript came out. So I did an article on TypeScript and in MSDN magazine, and it kind of catapulted from there. Doing a lot of contributions to the Yo ASP.NET template generators for .NET Core, and it just kind of scaffolding and things like that over and over and over, and kind of became a virtual part of the team. And then after that, I joined the ASP.NET Docs team, and I wrote was on the Docs team for a bit, and then we started the new division of developer relations, and been there now 3 years.
Awesome. So you presented at .NET Conf, but you've been working deeply on a few things. What's taking up your brain power these days?
Yeah, I think recently a lot of it's around cloud native type of stuff. I've got a show actually I'm doing with Glenn Condron. I think he was on your show recently too.
Yeah.
He and I work on a cloud native show. It's called the Cloud Native Show. And we are working a lot around just talking about containers, Kubernetes, and a lot of the work that we're doing on various teams, not just the .NET team, but various teams, on kind of what it is about, you hear the terms lift and shift and microservices and, obviously DevOps and things like that. Just talking to customers and the communities about what are the struggles that they're having, and, how do we make it easier, or, kind of clear the barriers for getting their software kind of out of their local data centers and moving them into the cloud. Obviously, it's, you talk to a customer, hey, I have this monolith application and I want to break it up, or how do I put it into a container and get that into the cloud somewhere? And then there's just a lot of other questions that come from that, like, how do I do containers on Azure? We have a number of ways to do that. So it's tackling those types of questions with our customers and in the community.
Well, there's lots of talk about building a new application targeting Azure and running in containers, but what are the options for getting those out of the data centers?
Yeah, that's interesting, because if you're going to start a new application, I think that is, I think for you and I, we've kind of been in the industry for a while. I think how many times in our lives have we had that opportunity? It's probably not very often that we get to do a new one, but it is a lot about planning and deciding, hey, I want to do a microservice that is that single responsibility service that does, just one thing. And it might be, returning a list of products. So we'll use that because that makes the most sense. I think APIs are probably the most common thing that we talk about. And, it might have one database or a part of a big database that you're using, and then putting that functionality in a container and then pushing that out to Azure. And that could be something like, Azure App Service. And that's enough, right? That's considered a microservice. It's in a container. We're putting in a DevOps pipeline to build a container, push it into a registry, and then pushing out the app service. And that in and of itself is kind of that cloud native pattern. But even with that, there's more questions that we can ask, like, do I run it on Linux? Do I run it on Windows? Do I put it in a Kubernetes cluster? So when you get into all of those challenges, it is planning out the whole system and getting on the whiteboard and really understanding what does a full landscape of your application look like, and not just sit down and start writing code, which I think we all want to do, but we tend to fumble a lot when we go at it with that type of an attitude.
Okay. Well, there are some rumblings about some new Windows container capabilities, which I guess goes right to those applications that are maybe stuck in the data center. What's new on that?
Yeah, I think, not just what's new. I think for me, and I'll speak to kind of my knowledge around the Windows containers, is if I go back about, I talk about this in my .NET Conf talk, was roughly around 3 years ago or just under 3 years ago, using Windows containers in .NET development, for instance, we were right around 13 gigs to use a Windows container.
For anything.
That is almost unreasonable when we're trying to build and deploy and scale, applications that require Windows. And now I think we're just shy of 2 gigs, right? Okay. And that's a significant reduction. And if we could get to a point where we could separate, the 32-bit from the 64-bit, we would even be smaller, right? And there might be some challenges that I'm not aware of to make that happen. So we're constantly trying to make some changes to make those smaller and smaller for doing that scalability. But, talking about getting out of my data center on-prem to the cloud, I was heavy into WCF, and there's a lot of businesses out there that have, SOAP-based services that are built on WCF. And I live under the impression of, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Right? Why should I try and, hey, let me change all of my code over to the latest and greatest thing? That WCF service just might work. So now having that capability to put that into a Windows container that's of reasonable size and then push it into, Azure Container Registry or something like that, and then be able to push it onto a, Windows cluster, a Windows pod inside of Kubernetes, because we now support, Windows on Kubernetes, is a big advantage for these customers. So I think that's some of the stuff that exists now. What's coming, they don't tell us everything just because we work at Microsoft. We know all the greatest things. Somebody asked me yesterday at the barbershop, what's going on with Project X Cloud? I'm like, I don't know. I know as much as you do. So there's a lot of stuff that could be available, and it could be smaller in size, which is, to me, just a bigger advantage. But in the same vein, there are things that Linux is giving us the support. We're putting support on Linux for things like .NET Core, where we don't have to have that the reliance on a Windows-based image as well.
So you mentioned that the Windows container is 2 gigs now. Is that every single Windows container, or if you do a derived container with just a couple tweaks, is that another 2 gigs?
Well, it's, I say 2 gigs, and that's 2 gigs for like .NET, right? So when we're talking about, Nano server plus, maybe IIS and plus the .NET SDK. So it is, the very base image is even smaller than that. So I was only speaking to kind of the .NET capability. So they're very, very small. If I just want to run something like, I don't know, some C++ Windows service, I could probably be even smaller than that if I wanted to put that out there. So again, significantly smaller than it was a while back. So it's getting better. And that, I think that's the bigger thing, is being able to, if you can imagine, just being able to kind of pull Windows down onto your local desktop and being able to develop that service on that interloop development. That's a huge advantage compared to what we could do, I don't know, even 5 years ago. We're like, oh, call your IT ops folks. Can you spin me up another VM for me to do my work on?
Right.
Yeah, that was a big blocker for us. So
now some people have been talking about the container as the new release candidate package format, rather than bundling up your application as a NuGet package and putting in Azure Artifacts. They're saying, hey, just have the container file be the package. And I'm thinking, okay, if it's a 2 gigabyte file, that's just a non-starter. So what's your opinion on what file format a release candidate should be now, and likely will be trending towards in the future?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I don't know. I like the idea of the container. For me is, we all kind of speak to the joke of, well, it works on my machine, and I think that for me, that was a selling point for me, and a selling point for many folks. I mean, if your C-level exec comes to you and says, hey, it's broken in production, and being able to, in most part, replicate production on your local machine, and say, oh, I found the bug, let me rebuild, and now we're able to deploy that. Or being able to, at least look at your app and say, I've built this. I call the container image, really the Docker file itself is really like a template for your application. And, being able to distribute that template of your application across multiple environments and know that it's going to be exact in QA and dev and production and testing and all that, is a huge, it's an increase in velocity for us to do development. Now, is that the distributed release candidate? Would we distribute, Windows to the world that way? I don't know, but there might be some flavor of that, for us to do it. I mean, we talked about VMs being that way, right? We would package up a VM, and now we're just going to ship the VM to everybody in our company, and you just log into the VM and it would be that way. Well, then the next thing you know, we've got a million VMs that we're managing everywhere. So
tiny variances. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I don't know, is it the right way? There might be something that comes after this that we decide, like, this is the next thing. If we really step back and look at it, containers haven't been around that long in mass use. There's been something, I think Google has been using it on Linux obviously longer than, the world. But now that it's out there, there's kind of like this hockey stick of use. There's going to be something behind it. There always is. I question, like, are we just solving the same problems differently? Is there something we don't know about containers that will come back and bite us? So right now, this is the thing. We're all rolling with it, and we're all having a party, and we're liking it.
Awesome. Now, you talk a lot about cloud native, and of course, everybody listening to this show is shipping some type of software using Microsoft platform development technologies. But what does cloud native mean, and what are you doing with it?
Yeah, it's funny because I asked on my show, I asked Brennan Burns that question, like, what does cloud native really mean? And he gave me an interesting answer. He goes, well, it's just a way for us to kind of agree to talk about putting apps and containers in the cloud, right? That's really what it is. And it is, an architectural pattern, I think, for us to do it. I think if we talked about like, what's a monolith? Like if I asked anybody in the software industry, like, what's a monolith? And they go, well, it's just one big executable or one big DLL that we just push somewhere. Cloud native by definition is, microservices, which is that single responsibility application that's put in a container, it's managed by DevOps and runs in a cloud system, right? That is the paraphrasing of what cloud native really means. Now, putting that into practice and putting all those pieces together can be a whole nother challenge in and of itself, because, what happens when you have, that sounds grand, like, well, that sounds awesome. What happens when you have, 100 services out there and you're managing them through all of these, DevOps pipelines and service discovery, and you pick the term that's out there right now. I use the analogy of it's like ping pong balls, right? There's just these ping pong balls everywhere you're trying to manage, and what if something goes down? And okay, well, we have Kubernetes. That's great. Well, now Kubernetes is out there, and that's another thing to learn. So I think that it's the thing right now that we're all trying to do. I joke a little bit that this is just kind of SOA, service-oriented architecture redefined. We were doing this, 10 years ago, where we had services all over the place that talk to each other, and we just managed it through Service Bus, right? And it was just event-driven development. This is kind of the same thing, but it's just in somebody else's data center with some different patterns. So I think that what's happening is we have folks on the Java side who use Spring and Spring Cloud to do microservice development. It's all event-driven and no dependencies between our services. In .NET, we're doing some great things with gRPC, with our new worker service templates that we have in .NET Core. So I think the frameworks that we're using are enabling this type of development in a rapid way. But it just makes it feel more approachable than I think it was in the past. So cloud native to me is just the same thing we've been doing, but just with the tools are better, the services are out there that are better, things like Kubernetes. And even before that, Docker Swarm was really a way for us to get there. It's just managing all these services without really having to think too much about it. But I think the next thing for us is tooling. Like when stuff breaks, I think that's when we start to get a little crazy.
Well, what's the answer? What about when stuff breaks? Because if you're gonna break up this single larger application, or if you're gonna have, you said 100, but I think even 10 is super common. It's easy to find. Okay, here's 10 independent running processes that do some stuff, but they're all coordinated. They're all part of the same. They're all part of the same system.
Yeah. Well, again, that gets back into what some of the frameworks offer. One of the examples I showed, I think at .NET Conf was, I had a worker service that really just monitored an endpoint on one of my microservices. Just checked the health point and said, "Is it up?" And I checked every 10 seconds, and that just wrote using Serilog, which is a sync, and just did a logging like, "Is it up?" There's built-in capabilities in .NET Core right now that integrate really great with some of the health checks in Docker and Kubernetes. The logging is one of them, and the frameworks again are that we're doing on our teams are making sure that those are almost built in without having to think about it. Mm-hmm. Then you have services in Azure like Azure Monitor, which is great, Application Insights. So making use of those types of services does help a lot with finding out when things go wrong. Like, great, now I know at least where to look. Before, we would do response.write line, response.write, out to the screen, or console.log. That was our debugging. Now we have these great tools that will kind of help us figure out what's going on. And, things like Kubernetes has, self-healing, stuff goes down, it'll try to bring it back up if things fail. Eventually things will fail ultimately, and that's where you rely on the tools like App Insights and Azure Monitor. So I think that's the answer. for now.
Okay. Now, if you are going to develop, either you have a big monolithic architecture application, or you're building a new one and you're saying, you know what, I'm not doing microservices. I'm doing just one application, and it's all going to be inside one Visual Studio solution, and maybe a big web application, maybe an offline job, and SQL database. Can it be cloud native?
Well, yeah, it could. Why not? Why not take a big web app? If I use an example, there's actually a meeting I had the other day. It's a gigantic as far as traffic is concerned, and we're talking upwards of 8 to 10 million hits, and it is a Razor Pages app that runs an app service. And sure, we could put that in a container and run it right there. Now, is that a microservice? No, because it's doing a number of things. Right? It's not that single responsibility thing. And but is it cloud native? Yeah, because it's built. It's built in Azure DevOps. It's put in a container, and it's pushed out, and it's got blue-green deployments, and it has testing. So it has all the elements there. And if it goes down, there's logging. So I think it has all of the pieces and parts. So we could call it as a cloud native app. Does it have 15 microservices behind it? Not necessarily. But I think we're checking a lot of the boxes with something like that.
So it sounds like cloud native is getting away from having any operating system to manage that's in the mix.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. I don't care or know about a lot of the infrastructure in the OS below it. Like, I know that I'm running on a Linux container, which means I rely on a Linux kernel, but I don't know about the VM or the physicality of that machine. That machine could die 100 times over a month. My app is still running. Like, I have no idea. Like, I'm just renting. Like, I'm a tenant out there. So yeah, that's basically it.
As much as it is nice to own your own house in the computer world, it's sometimes really nice to just have an apartment and not have to mow the grass. And that's the operating system. Do I really want to manage this whole operating system? Or do I just want to give you, here's my application, just run it for me?
Yeah, I think I use it as like renting a house versus buying a house. It's, when you rent the house, if the lights break, I call the landlord. He comes and fixes them, right? But if I own the house, I'm responsible for switching things out. And it's the same thing with your servers, So I would much rather rent my servers and not have to think about it.
Yeah.
In fact, if it breaks, I don't even know it broke, right? That's even better than renting the house.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a software engineering firm and Microsoft Gold partner, empowering development teams to be their best. ClearMeasure equips developers with the DevOps tools, methods, and automation necessary to focus on building their applications, rather than wrestling with builds, deployments, or environments. Click clear-measure.com to see whether a DevOps implementation is for you.
I've been doing announcements at the beginning of the show, but then I realized that it was delaying the time till we can dig into the valuable content and get on with the guests. So I'm moving the announcements to about midpoint so that we can just get the content going sooner. But here we go. I'll be at Ignite, and I'm hosting a special social developer party the night before the keynote. And it's called Party with Palermo. I started doing this in 2006. It's just a fun time, and it's grown ever since. So if you're a developer, go to eventbrite.com and search for Party with Palermo, and you can RSVP there. I'm also one of the conference's official community reporters, and so find me at the conference. I'll be walking around with a bunch of camera gear. Also, on November 2nd, which is right at the beginning of the Ignite conference, my latest book, .NET DevOps for Azure, will be out in print from A Press. And you can also get the ebook right now before that time at bit.ly/.net DevOps ebook. But come to the Microsoft Ignite bookstore and you can get the print book of .NET DevOps for Azure, and also have a special offer for conference group leaders or user group leaders. Anyone speaking at those, if for those in-person events, I'd love to send you 2 free print copies of the book for you to give away. And to request those, go to bit.ly/.net DevOps book for community. And a special pre-release offer, which does expire November 2nd when we have the official release of the book. If you send me an email at jeffrey@clear-measure.com, and if you can tell me who my very first guest was on the Azure DevOps podcast, then I'll send you a free ebook copy just for you. And the last announcement, if you followed me for over 20 years, you know that I love to teach, and I'll be teaching another training course, my .NET DevOps Bootcamp, on October 28th. This is aimed at lead developers, team architects who want to ship quickly and operate better. Deep, immersive, hands-on 2-day training course. We only have a couple spots left. Check out my Twitter at Jeffrey Palermo, JEFFREYPALERMO. There's plenty of links there. And if you can't make this one, we'll be doing another date in a few months. And we'll test out this announcement spot in the podcast and keep getting information and content that helps you ship better. Now back onto the show. Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation is zero downtime deployments, and blue green's a pattern, but there lots of people I talk to are really trying to figure out how to make that possible in their environment, because they're always dealing with the history of whatever system they have. Well, there's tons of stuff in .NET Core, and the .NET Conf talked a lot about it. The Ignite conference is coming up. Which elements are really interesting to you, or you're doing a lot of work with these days?
Yeah, I want to say that there's really a few things. gRPC is really cool. We're working with Google to, we're contributing to that project and making sure that we've got some great integration and capabilities with .NET Core, and being able to either consume or be, the other side of a gRPC service. And that's really great. I mean, it's super fast. And if you like that contract-based development, similar to WCF, and have those binary type messages go back and forth, we have those capabilities now in .NET Core. So that's really cool to see that move forward. We have the worker template now in .NET Core, and being able to, with just a few lines of code, create those services that, you may have done in the past where it was a Windows service and having to have, MSI installers and have those running. But being able to build those. And what's interesting about it is when you do kind of file a new project and you say worker template and you start to type that code, they all feel the same. If I'm doing a worker template or an ASP.NET Core website or an API, everything is still there. So I'm doing a worker template and I've got dependency injection is there, and my logging is all built in. So it feels very natural. I'm not having to learn something completely new. And then my worker template, which I can put in a container and throw into, Azure Container Instances, which is great. With one NuGet package and one line of code, I can turn that into a Windows service, right? And install that on my VM or my local machines or wherever. But on top of that, I could also add another NuGet pack and turn it into a Linux systemd daemon service, right? And be able to run it there. But again, it's all .NET Core and it all kind of feels the same. And that's super exciting to see that type of stuff that's available. So now it's like, we always talk about like .NET Cores is, it's easy to think that .NET in general is just, it's just websites. It's been around for 20 years and it's like, it's just a website. But now being able to write like Linux services, with a few lines of code, and have it just feel natural, it is really great to kind of see that moving forward. So I think that's super exciting. And we always talk about like, .NET's, we can write everything in it. I mean, you literally can write just about anything you want to write in .NET. And if you really kind of step back, and we talked about containers today, if I can pick up .NET, .NET Core, I can write anything, something on IoT. I can put it in a container. I can run it on a drone. I mean, that's like a legitimate story. So I'm really excited to kind of see what we're going to show at Ignite when it comes to doing things like that. We're doing some really cool stuff on IoT. But yeah, just the ease of how it is to just do file new. And if you want to build a service on Windows using Visual Studio, or if you're on a Mac with VS Code or VS for Mac, it's just a great story. I think every year we kind of make the statement, it's such a great time to be a developer and have your choice. I think it's even more so true today. I can grab your machine. I can grab anybody's machine. I feel I can get my job done. And I think we would spend a couple of days in the past just setting up our machine to get started to do our jobs.
Yeah.
And now we don't. Yeah. At least 2 days. So I think that's the exciting part. I'm really, really excited to see what we're going to show at Ignite this year.
Now, do you know what you're going to show at Ignite? Just hush hush secret?
No, I don't know, to be honest. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of as usual, when it comes to Azure, and that's a good part of my time I spend on the Azure side of things. I suspect we're going to see a lot of things go GA. I think those are some of the things that I probably do know about. We have a lot of preview services that I expect will say, yes, these are now generally available. But I think we tend to show a lot of things on the product side and the business product side when it comes to Ignite. That's more of a kind of IT ops and services show and less of a developer show. I think we're probably 70-30 when it comes to business versus developers. But yeah, we're talking 30,000 plus people at Ignite. So you never know what's going to happen. So I know I'll be there all week at various booths and things. So It's going to be a busy week for us.
Now, we talk about custom software all the time when we talk about cloud and cloud native, but there's a lot of organizations that are going, quote, cloud native with just remote workers with Office 365. And do you work with any of those things about how to even manage Windows workstations with somebody who just works from home and they're in Microsoft 365? Because that's different from an IT perspective.
Yeah, it is way different as managing those workstations. I know that for me, I recently got a new laptop for work, and I just mentioned it would take me a couple of days to get started from a developer standpoint, but even just getting a machine and going, oh my gosh, I got to set up my Outlook and my Teams and all this kind of stuff. I literally just went to office.com. I signed in with my Active Directory and I was ready to go. It was like that simple. And I think, man, this was at least a week, a few years ago for me to get Windows updates running. So yeah, I think just the manageability of remote workers, and we have a good percentage of people. Almost my entire Cloud Advocate team is remote. So yeah, being able to do that is it's really, really great.
So that's a perfect case. So Microsoft, they've obviously adopted Microsoft 365. You are on the other side of the country from Redmond.
Yeah.
And so are you in a VPN the whole day, or is there something that's surpassed VPN now?
No, actually, if I look at if I just click on my little network tab here, and I don't know what icon it is. There it is. Okay. There's a thing here that says, Microsoft VPN connected. I didn't set that up. It was just there.
Right.
Yeah. And it's a matter of, I think when you say connect, there's a thing in there now that says connect your work or school account. You log it in and it's like, great. What's your, what do you want to connect to? Mine's like Redmond, blah, blah, blah. And It's like, okay, you're connected. Good to go. And, my wife's also a remote worker, not for Microsoft, but for another company. Now, her VPN story is a little different than mine. She's still using some, third-party software, I think, to do it, but same story. Like the connectivity, just like log in with your credentials and boom, you're on your way, and you're connected to everything on the backside of the world, from your company. So yeah, I think that the ease of that is just, I think we take it for granted, to be honest, when it comes to remote working.
Right. Well, it used to be that you couldn't even get an internet. Well, shoot, that was 20 years ago. Never mind. You couldn't even get an internet connection fast enough. It's like, oh, yeah. Is it going to, I got this fast DSL.
Yeah. I remember the days of ISDN and an ISDN was like 128K or something like that. Like,
right.
You were a baller if you had an ISDN line into your house, and I think right now I'm pulling like a 100 megabit or something at least into the house.
Yeah. So, well, there's definitely the age generation gap of people who remember doing any kind of work before you had internet everywhere.
Yes.
Like, oh no, let me connect my modem so I can get on the internet.
Yeah. No, it's again, we really do. You take it for granted. And not to age. I mean,
we're old.
People know, we're old. I mean, I literally learned how to do HTML off of view sourcing AOL. That's how I learned how to do HTML. And now I get, just driving around, I'll look at my phone or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I'm connected to a hotspot somewhere, just like, because my cable provider, Spectrum, and they just have hotspots all over town. And I go, oh, awesome. I can work at that coffee shop,
right.
on Wednesday or whatever. And I think that's a huge advantage to us. And, thinking back to, AOL days, and to know that we grew up in a time where AOL was up, and now I think they're just email now. They're gone. They were the ISP, now they're nobody. The 56K modems, and anybody can remember the sound, like you remember the dial-up sound, like
right.
This was yesterday. There are folks our colleagues that we work with, that they would never know that sound. That was some time.
That's true.
Literally watching images paint on the screen.
Oh, right.
And now we live in a time of immediacy, where if it doesn't happen immediately, we're like, oh, this is so slow. And it's like, you're getting 60 megs. And to turn that into, kind of circle back into our conversation, was literally on a plane going to .NET Conf, and I was pulling containers from Docker Hub and from Azure, while on Wi-Fi on the plane, and thinking
through a satellite,
over satellite, like this would never be possible. Like, I'm building Kubernetes cluster stuff, like this is insane. Like, you really take it for granted.
Right. Well, I look forward to the era of cloud native, where a company and even more small businesses could start and have Microsoft level quality IT infrastructure just by signing up for Microsoft 365, and have no server, no data center anywhere. And so you still have to have that stuff to have the concept of a VPN. You have to have some type of data center, but to have literally a company that is cloud native in their entire IT infrastructure, I think there's a few pieces that are missing right now to do that, but it seems like we're on our way.
Well, I think that there are businesses now where, as a part of, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but there are parts of Office 365 that you can get like Dynamics, like you can get a CRM.
Yeah.
So you can manage your whole customer pipeline and really not have any infrastructure other than your desktop PC or a laptop, inside of your office, and really manage your whole business that way. And that's a big advantage. It really wasn't too long ago, the foreseeable past, that I worked in companies, and I built the local server that had our apps. We had backups to the cloud or to some offsite backups, but a majority of our business ran on site, and we didn't have things like Dynamics or other CRMs out there like SAP or Salesforce or whatever you want to call it. So all that stuff now being available with point and click is a big advantage to even small businesses. It's very approachable for them to get started easily.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, hey, this is a lot of great information. If the listeners would like to dive into more about containers or the cloud native store, or even what's new in .NET Core, what resources would be interesting to them?
Well, I would always point people to our docs. If you just go to docs.com, that's where they can get started with docs on just about any one of our products is the entry point there.
Docs.microsoft.com.
You can go to, I believe we just got docs.com.
Docs.com. Oh, wow.
Look at that. I'm a wealth of useless information.
Wow.
Yeah. So docs.com we own.
For the world.
Yeah, that's right. You go to the worldofdocs.com, and that's literally the entry point to just about every product that we have on Docs. It's .NET, Visual Studio, PowerShell, gaming. And then also at the top of that page, you'll see a link to learning. And, that's Microsoft Learn, where you can get started on just about most of the things that you probably talk on your show, as well as, folks that want to learn about DevOps or containers or .NET, et cetera. There's a lot of learn modules there. And then
awesome.
I've got, for cloud native stuff, I've got my show that I'm doing. I think we're doing every 2 weeks. We're doing releases on it. And they can get to that on aka.ms/cloud native show. And we spend a lot of time just talking with the engineers and the folks that either build and or contribute to cloud native related tech that we're doing at Microsoft. And it's really great because we actually shoot that on campus. So you get to see a lot of the buildings and I mean, you've had the opportunity to walk around that campus, and
it's beautiful.
It's a great campus, and we're doing a lot of construction on campus right now to kind of put some new buildings in. So every time I get to walk into a new building, I'm like, wow, I didn't even know this thing existed. Like, what do they do here?
Right.
So it's a great opportunity to hear from the people building the things, but also seeing kind of where they work.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for being on the show and working into your schedule. I really appreciate it, Shayne.
Yeah, anytime. And I look forward to, we catch up at Ignite.
Absolutely. I'll be there. And if you listeners love podcasts and love video shows as well, make sure to check out the Cloud Native Show, aka.ms/Cloud Native Show. It also redirects to Channel 9. You can search there. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.